Perfect. Okay. Welcome. I wish to call to order the regular meeting of council on May 26 at 3:30 p.m. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet First Nation, on whose traditional territories the district of Ucluelet operates. Notice a video recording. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube. Delegates and meeting participants are also advised that this meeting is being conducted via Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Everybody, we have one addition to the agenda. Does everybody have that? Seeing yes. Okay. Looking for approval of the agenda with the one late item. Moved by Councillor Cole, second by Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Perfect. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from May 12th. Moved by Councillor Cole, second by Councillor Kemps. Any errors or omissions? Looking to the right. Seeing none. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any unfinished minutes or unfinished business? Hearing and seeing none. Mayor's announcements. I'll just get into a couple. I just really want to thank the community and the fire chief for last week. With I think the siren tests that we've been long waiting was very successful, as well as the cell phone notification seemed to have gone very well, and I believe there's about just under 2,000 people that are registered to be on that cell phone notification. So that was a great trial, and from my understanding, every third Wednesday going forward, that siren will be tested as well as the notification, so which is great. But I also would like to take advantage of this week is Paramedic Week, and I just really want, I know Councillor Cole, I'm going to put you on the hot seat there, but just really, extending our thank yous to, what do you have, 14 members or 12 members?
We're 12, and I'm very proud of everyone. We are fortunate in this community to have such community-minded people, and that's across the board, not just obviously in paramedicine, but there are a lot of communities less fortunate than us, and especially facing a pandemic, there are people who are finding reasons for leaves and to not taking shifts and not stepping forward. And we've been super fortunate, and we haven't been faced with some of the challenges of some of the communities, but every one of my members was willing to make those sacrifices and step up in the moment, and continue to do so. So I couldn't be more grateful for the crew that makes me feel proud, makes me look like I'm doing a good job and keeping the ambulance staffed and the community safe. So thank you to my crew.
And thank you from the community for what you and your crew are doing. So thanks again, Councillor Cole. Or paramedic, I think Unit Chief Cole. Unit Chief Head Cole. Public input. Mr. Roenberg, is there any input from the public?
No input has come in so far.
Okay, no input. Thank you. We have two information items. Maybe we'll start with 10.1. Does anybody have any questions regarding the information? Nothing? Okay. Obviously, the planning department's well versed of that there's opportunities, and I believe what's happening on Lot 13 is a prime example of a partnership that's being done by the private sector to help out with housing. 10.2, anything? Hearing, seeing none? Okay. I thought for sure, Lara, you or Councillor Kemps, you would have jumped on the 10.2 there. Is your schedule getting too busy these days? You're deciding to say no to things? Oh, she's not answering. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for that.
Okay. Council committee reports. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. I attended the Wild Pacific Trail meeting through Teams, not Zoom, but Teams on May 13th. They have decided to reschedule their AGM, which was originally slotted for May 31st, to a date to be determined later, possibly in conjunction with the opening of the Spring Cove section of the trail. Might be great to combine those two things. Tanya has launched 4 Learn Where You Live videos on their YouTube channel, which are really fun to watch if you get a chance. And it was interesting. The donation boxes are obviously very empty these days because there are very few tourists around to walk the trail. But a company called Canada Helps, it's an online company, ended up giving the Wild Pacific Trail $3,000 to help repair those benches that were vandalized a month or so ago. So that was good news. And of course, we all attended the Harbor Authority meeting on May 19th, and I will be attending the Vancouver Island Regional Library meeting this Saturday, May 30th, which happens to be my 33rd anniversary. That's it for me.
Is that meeting this Saturday, is that virtual as well?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Councillor Kemps?
May I just ask a question for Councillor McEwen really quick?
No, you go for it.
The Canada Helps, was that a grant that they applied for, or did they just receive that, or did they have to apply for that? Do you know?
No, it comes through their website. It comes to them monthly. So it's some sort of charitable organization that people can donate $5, $10, $20 to.
Oh, okay.
And it accumulates, and then once a month they send the money through to the Wild Pacific Trail. I think any charitable society can apply to have that.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Sorry. So on the 20th, sorry, my computer just went to sleep. On the 20th, I attended the Tourism Equality Board meeting, and they're primarily working on messaging along with our recovery efforts, and also the PRBC at the junction will tentatively be open like June 5th or 6th for FYI, and also the Chamber Info Center, the Info Center at our Chamber building, will be closed for the summer, just for numbers and staffing and so forth, just for your information. I also been still attending the Vancouver Island Coastal Economic Development Association and the BC Economic Development Association weekly meetings. And primarily what we're working on is just sharing messaging, and a lot of, what's happening now is sector roundtables, which we've been working on for a few months, which is good. So we kind of got the leg up. So I continue to be involved with that. That's about it. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Councillor Kemp. So with the opening up of the PVRC, is Parks Canada announced what they're planning to do with an opening?
With an opening for the parks, or an opening?
Yeah, I was under the impression Parks Canada was yesterday was going to announce how things were going to look for June. Have you heard anything?
No, there hasn't been anything secured yet. There hasn't been any. That's correct, right, Mr. Boyson, when we heard that?
Through the mayor, nothing official that we've heard yet. I know it's pending.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So thank you for that. Any other questions for Councillor Kemps? Councillor Hoare?
Hi, Councillor Kemps, you were asking about Canada Helps. It's something that the Wild Pacific Trail has been partnered with for quite a while. And yeah, as Councillor McEwen said, it is basically a charitable way to donate to a number of nonprofits across Canada. Okay. And they have the links on some of their messaging and on their webpage. And so they have actually been getting, and often it is 10 or 20 bucks. It's not a lot, But it adds up, and they did get this rather, large bonus number of donations when those benches were vandalized, and that was they broadcast that information with the link that you could donate there. So
Oh, right. Okay. So it's kind of like, so sorry, so it's kind of like what CBT is doing now as well too. CBT.
it's similar. It's been around a little bit longer, but yeah, the Wild Pacific Trail Society is also involved in that CBT giving catalog as well.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Just thought I'd, throw a little bit more information onto that fire. Obviously, I was attending the Wild Pacific Trail meeting on the 13th as well. And really, if you have not checked out Tanya's videos, the Love Where You Live ones, I've been firing them to my cousins across the US and Canada and everybody. The slug one is particularly popular with the young boys in the crowd, let me tell you. Beyond that, yeah, I don't have anything extra. I did the Harbor Authority meeting, and I am just working. But I will put my little work hat on for a moment and just let y'all know that as of June 7th, we will be doing at the co-op. Hours will be 9 to 7, 7 days a week, and we will not be doing the midday closure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And also a heads up, the construction will be starting on the 8th back up. So because we figure it'll be a quiet enough summer that we can get that construction done. So things will be very different at the co-op in about a week and change. That's it.
Thanks for that update. Councillor Cole?
I'm just going to preface this by warning Joey that speaking of little boys, it's not slugs that's making my son happy right now. It's that he finished homeschooling early and has found a way to be watching us on YouTube or however we're streaming this. So if you get any heckling that sounds like it's coming from a 9-year-old, please ignore him. And hi, Bo. In the living room. So I attended also the Harbor Authority. The only other thing outside of all the healthcare Zooming that's going on is the ACRD. They are dealing with a lot of the same things we are with messaging and reopening thoughts and how the next, how the next phase is going to go and their task force, etc. So aside from that, and the fact that I have been reaching out into the community and praising our crew for the Paramedic Appreciation Week, things are rather slow outside of healthcare.
Perfect, thank you. Off to me, obviously it's nothing exciting to report other than, I continue to talk to Scott Fraser and hoping and making a friendly reminder, not forgetting about the BC Wild Salmon report that the province came out with in February of 2019, and I'm hoping that he's going to be able to come back with some information about some of the action items that were in that report, back to community-based fishing and stuff like that. So it's COVID-19 is taking a lot of our focus, but we can't forget about the wild salmon and things like the Central West Coast Forest Society that's big on creek restoration, and hopefully the dollars are getting to those people that are actually doing the work. Outside of that, I think everybody's pretty much up to the things that we're doing, and I really don't have anything else to report. See no questions. 12.1 COVID-19 Task Force update. Mr. Boyson, verbal report.
Thank you. So through the mayor, so we're going to provide this, each council meeting will have an opportunity for to provide this little summary about what our task force has been working on, and also a chance for council to ask any questions that they have. So we've had a couple of meetings, and our task force since our last council meeting, and the first meeting where we all got together, we spent a lot of time on communications, and as we do now, we continue to talk a lot about communications. This is a really important time right now. I think as phase 3 is supposed to be starting up on June 1st, which is Monday coming up, and there's a lot of businesses following those guidelines, the communications of everybody connected to our task force, which includes the Chamber of Commerce, Tourism, Ucluelet, and the district, and the health community as well. It's really important we're all on the same page. So that first meeting we had, we really were working with Tourism Ucluelet a lot, and they've been taking that messaging forward, and it's just good to get all the parties' feedback onto it. We're all going in the same direction, and I think Tourism Ucluelet has appreciated that. Their board is getting all their communications ready for this next phase. And then the next meeting, we did get in a little bit more into mental health and the healthcare system in general. And I think it's natural that it would come up about the capacity of our health system already being a challenge, with Ucluelet already exploring a health center as for a future option. It's already an issue that the task force has discussed, is that the capacity of our system already was a challenge before the pandemic hit. So Dr. Carrie Marshall is on our group, and we talked about some of the challenges and issues that could come up related to that, and what the outcomes could be. And we're trying to anticipate some of the scenarios that could come up, but of course, they're hard to think about and discuss about some variables about what the impacts could be on the community. So we just want to make sure we're all ready and sharing information, and we're prepared. We did ask for Marcy DeWitt from the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network to join us for our next meeting on Thursday morning. And so we think there's an opportunity there for some joint support for health and mental health and a range of other services that there's some areas that just whatever happens, I think there's an opportunity during this pandemic for some support that could be across communities, and also include our First Nation neighbors in Ucluelet or Toquat as well. So we'll explore that a little bit more with Marcy when we meet. And the only other thing I think it's worth mentioning, I mean, we have a long list of stakeholders that each of our members of our task force are connected to. And I met with Lori Gerke, the manager of the co-op today. And just to reinforce something that I think is important, I just wanted to clarify with her, it's about getting delivery of groceries to your house. And it's something that she reinforced, that she really wants the community and accommodation providers, residents, everybody to really use that as much as possible. She indicated that no order is too small. She will be, with these advanced open hours, I know there's going to be the new hours for people, but she's encouraging that people do that as much as possible. There's still people who the co-op is a part of their social lives, and some of the longtime members of the community. It's something that she's not restricting people from coming in, because that's a part of the community as well. But for many people in the community, they can order the food and get it delivered, and she's happy to do that. I think it's really important. It's one of the highlights for us in our task force about a main vector for the pandemic and for the virus. So the more we can do that, the better. And that includes the accommodation provider. So that was good information provided by her, and we'll share that with the task force. And the last thing is just the district's continuing with Thursday updates on COVID to the community. We do the Yuki Mail and the social media updates as well. So we'll have more information coming out. The initial couple of weeks of using our community monitors, having them on the weekend, it's gone very well so far. And so they're a good system to have in place as we get to reopening. And if there's any other questions that council has, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Oh, Councillor Hoare.
First, I've got to unmute myself. Sorry. I just wanted to clarify through the mayor to staff, Mr. Boyson, that information about preferring deliveries, because really, as somebody in the store, I'd really prefer people got their groceries delivered. That's going out to, like you said, all the accommodation providers and stuff, so that when people come, are they getting that messaging before they come or only when they arrive? Because I'm wondering if people are being told to bring their own stuff so they don't have to go to the grocery store or even call for a delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the message right now, I think, with Tourism Ucluelet's messaging is about bringing food in. And I discussed that with her. That means a lack of reduced revenue for the co-op. And she is very comfortable with that. She says in the current conditions, she's comfortable with that messaging about encouraging people to bring food beforehand. But if they do need to get something once they're here, that we should also encourage them to order in from the co-op. So So we want to make sure the accommodation providers get that as well. So that messaging I was talking about with Tourism Ucluelet, we just have to make sure that I think both those messages are in there. If you didn't bring what you needed, order it in from the co-op. So we'll make sure that gets communicated at our task force meeting.
Councillor McEwen?
Yes, thank you. Just wondering through the mayor to staff, what the COVID monitors have been doing. Have they been monitoring like the public spaces like playgrounds and the skateboard park, and have they encountered any issues, or are people more or less behaving themselves?
It's been exactly that. They've been monitoring the public spaces and just observing and seeing what's going on out there. The weather helped us on the weekends, and also just the message was out still. So the first weekend was over the long weekend, but the messaging we put out there still was working, and that ties in with the provincial messaging. So it's been generally quiet for them so far. We've had a couple of small items, but it's been very minor. The occasional thing to report to bylaw, and it's not been a tense start for them so far. So, but as things reopen, we're expecting that to pick up.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. Reserve birth fees information. I believe I asked for this one, and oh, we got a hand up. Councillor Cole.
I just wanted to, we have inner boat basin, outer boat basin, Whiskey Dock. There's nothing there about the 52 steps. And I know that, so to be clear, so I'm not confused, if you pay for your time, say you pay for months or whatever it is, then you don't have a reserved spot, but you're still parking your boat somewhere and you're still guaranteed that there's enough spots because you paid for a spot, that there will be one.
Perhaps I'll get Ms. Fortune up here just to give us a little background on the report, and then we'll dig into the questions. Welcome.
And can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Just before we started, I just want to point out at the bottom of the chart that I put in, I fixed the numbers, but apparently I didn't hit save. So if you look at the totals on the bottom, it's 34, 11, 3, and 48. My apologies on that. So at the Harbor Authority meeting, the Harbor Authority requested information to come to council. The three areas that the questions were regarding was the reserve berthage fees, the income derived, the volume of boats, and you are correct, Councillor Calder, 52 steps is not on here, and the financial impact of waiving reserve berth fees, which has Ms. Monteith's breakdown in the report. As you can see, for our primary berthage fees, we're looking at 48 boats to the tune of $21,600. And this is based on $450 annually per boat. Sorry, 6 months. Thank you, Joey. So $450 for 6 months. Is there questions that I can answer?
So that's 450 plus a 6 months mortgage, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, so this fund is for reserving only. So they still would be paying the actual fee, the mortgage fee. This is the reserve berthage as per the
Current bylaw.
current bylaw. That's correct, yes.
Councillor McEwen?
Thank you. Through the mayor to staff, Ms. Fortune. So it's 450 for the reserved, but would they not then pay a 12-month mortgage rate? Or is it a 6-month mortgage rate and the 450?
That is dependent on what they would like to do. They can do a 6-month reserved mortgage, And usually that's done in more of the summertime to ensure that they have better access in the summertime. But often it is in combination with an annual mortgage fee. Yes.
And just for clarity, the minimum right now in the bylaw is 6 months.
That is correct.
Councillor Cole?
For just for clarification, for reserve.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
So I might have some misinformation here, or David was given some misinformation that there was not a 6-month mortgage available that would cover May, June, July, August, September, October. Or maybe he might have said to me June, July, August, September, that there wasn't a 4-month option, that it was either 1 month at a time or 6 months or a year. But do we have a 6-month mortgage breakdown, or is it that we don't have a 4-month one?
I believe we do definitely have a 6-month mortgage. I don't know if there's a timing on that would surprise me, but I'm sorry, I do not know that off the top of my head. I can get that information, but there is a 6-month mortgage fee. Yes.
Okay. So then I think his ask of me to bring up was, why wouldn't we offer a 4-month that was cheaper than paying for 4 individual months, but wasn't quite as expensive as a third of a year, or as good of a deal as a third of the year, just for the fact that there are people who want to put their boat in the water, and we could catch an extra couple of months of rate without, I don't know.
No, I hear you, and I think I'll finish that sentence off. Obviously, this is a COVID-19 issue that's causing disruptions down at the small craft, and hence why I wanted just to get this brought before us. And I'm not trying to beat a dead dog here, but the reality is when this bylaw was created in 2011, we've had a very robust charter fishing and activities down there, and the joys for people like your husband trying to find a mortgage for 2 or 3 months in the summertime is pretty hard, more of a wishful thinking just because of the demand of the charter fishermen down there. But we'll say that we're into June now. May's over, unfortunately, and I don't think I've ever seen that dock as empty as it is right now. And I don't want to be giving preferential treatment to a certain group, but the reality is the bylaw that was created, where if you are going to pay the $450, and on top of that, you're required to pay a 6-month mortgage, when a lot of these guys are just trying to, gals, are trying to just simply get a 60-day season out of here. And I would like to see sometime a review of the bylaw, and in particular regarding the 6-month. If you want your reserve mortgage, fine. We can accept the fact that in order to have that spot that you've had for a number of years, the 450 is probably a fair number. But asking some of the user groups down there, in particular the charter boats, to pay a 6-month, I think it's a little bit hard, considering I think I don't have to explain myself. I think you all know that. So maybe, what are your thoughts on the 6-month part of that, Councillor Kemps?
I've been having a lot of conversation with the fishing sector in that sector right now, because of them starting to open up the vessels under 12 people. So there's we will see an influx of boats coming in the next couple weeks. The question that they brought to me is not necessarily the reserve berth fees. I think a lot of it, I want to have a conversation around what do they call it when you unload and load people? Is that the wharfage fee? Is that what you call it when you're loading and unloading people?
It's through the mayor, it's a docking fee. It's
a docking fee.
Yeah, a loading fee, basically.
Because I know we're not going to see as many people loading and unloading this year, but I would like to see what that bylaw looks like, or that the numbers look like for that. And also I'm trying to figure out in my head what exactly the insurance, the liability insurance, it was at 2 million, and if we dropped it to 1 million, there's some savings in there. There's just I think a lot of these guys, they're okay with the reserve berth fees. They're really nervous about I know they won't lose it, but there's that. I mean, I would like to see the bylaw and to see what it looks like in a 4-month as opposed to a 6-month. But I think it would be interesting to look at that those birthing fees, the unloading and loading fees. I don't know what your thoughts are, everybody.
Do you have any other comments there from other councillors? Councillor McEwen?
Yes, I agree with Miss Fortune. From the people I've talked to, they are okay with that reserved moorage fee, but the docking fees might be scaring them a little bit. And I also, looking at the financial impact here of 21,600, and our Werfinger would get 40% of that as part of his wages, which he won't if we eliminate it. And I don't think that that's the right thing to do. I think all of us who have businesses that rely on tourism are going to have a less than profitable year, but I don't know that I really want to pick on just one sector and at the risk of reducing our Werfinger's salary.
Councillor Cole?
I think that, and it seems counterintuitive to me to perhaps give a deal on something which is based on usage, because if they're going to be loading and unloading people, that means they got that business. So that sort of should correlate with what is paid, because you probably should be able to afford to pay it if you did that business. It's the things that are fixed rates that don't fluctuate with how much you're working or using or the usage of your business for profit, that the fixed rates that might be where it would make more sense to, in different sectors, not just this, but to cut people some slack. But in something that is actually attached to usage, it seems counterintuitive to cut the deal there. Or that's just me.
Any other comments there? Again, I do have a motion in front of me, which I'll say here in a second. I hope you agree, and it's basically the focus on looking at the monthly portion of the reserved fee here, and having staff provide a report of what's that look like, and the financial impact if it was changed, from 6 months down to, let's say, 90 days, 3 months or 2 months. And I think then we'd be able to have that discussion about that. So I'm going to say, I would like to move that council direct staff to provide a report about amending the Ucluelet Harbor Regulation Bylaw number 1134, 2011 to allow for monthly reserved berths. Second by Councillor Cole. Any other further discussion? Hearing, seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kemps.
Would it be, through the mayor to staff, what would it look like if you drop the liability insurance? What would that look like on it?
Can we just finish off this motion, and then we can touch base on your insurance if you don't mind? Thank you. So we'll just call that to question. So all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now to insurance. Go ahead, Councillor Kemps.
Through a district's perspective, through the mayor to staff, what would it look like if you had a different, needed a different liability insurance as opposed to the 2 million to a 1 million?
Through the mayor, so we could take a look at that, but I think generally the answer would be that it's increased liability for us. So there's an increased risk for us if there's not that amount, and so that amount has been established in the past, and we could look into it to see if there's some reason behind that. But I think that's established basically because of what the potential of worst case scenarios could end up resulting costing the district. So there's an increased risk basically is what we're left with if we reduce that amount.
Okay, any other questions regarding insurance? Okay. You all right with that, Councillor Kemps? Uh, 12.4, application for liquor license changes, Black Rock Resort lobby and foyer. Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, through the mayor. This is an application for a liquor and cannabis regulation branch to the LCRB by Black Rock Resort, really for a change to what they call their primary structural change, is the language that the LCRB uses when they're changing the areas licensed within their liquor primary license. Essentially, for some time, they've had to take out special event licenses when they want to use their lobby area for weddings, receptions, special events. And their application in a nutshell is to expand their liquor primary license to allow them, to not have to take out special event licenses, but just be licensed in the lobby and the deck off the lobby, somewhat permanently, if you will. And so that these kinds of structural change licenses do trigger for a liquor primary license a need for the applicant to turn to the local government for gathering public input, unless the local government has opted out. And there's no policy or bylaw by which Euclid has opted out of this, so that's not something that can be waived at the staff level, so hence this report. So in the report, we do note that this is essentially space that's internal to the resort. This is in a location, it's not like it's next door to residential areas or neighborhoods who would be affected by, a change to the hours of operating within the lounge of the resort. If anyone's affected, it would be resort guests, we presume. And on that basis, staff are recommending that council might want to consider opting out of public input, because the public input portion is somewhat structured so that we would have to give notice, gather public input, and council then have to receive that and make comment to the LCRB formally at a future council meeting. So that, I guess, in the request when it comes down to it from BlackRock, is that today, if council were to opt out, it would allow them to go straight to the LCRB. The LCRB may still gather public input themselves directly, but this would save some time in the process, we understand. So beyond that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councillor Cole?
I assume in reading through this that the urgency in not going the traditional route is because they want to have extra area to have more distance in between cocktailing patrons.
Through the mayor, I think this actually was contemplated and began before the COVID-19 pandemic. This was more, I think, as they see demand for events and receptions and such, where they use the lobby. It takes some work on their staff, on their behalf, to put together the special event licenses, applications, and go through that process each time they want to do it. So this was, I think, mostly around having flexibility and streamlining their operations. And I believe they have a new food and beverage manager who took this on.
Okay, so and then you said likely permanent, or you used a word that wasn't a succinct definite, but this would be a permanent change.
This is requested, yes, this is a request for a permanent, if you will, change to their liquor license to expand to the areas that they are licensed to serve in, to include that lounge and lounge deck as part of their permanent license. So this is a different situation from the other report on your agenda that came in as a late item. That's a COVID-based thing. This is more of a ongoing change to their liquor license they're seeking.
And then likely, how does occupancy and such play into these areas and what they can accommodate now in the COVID and in future? Who regulates the numbers, the sheer numbers that they can accommodate in the foyer on the deck for cocktailing purposes?
Through the mayor, attached to the report is a diagram or a plan of the building that it maybe sort of, there's some fine print there. That is an analysis of all of the areas of the ground floor by an architect. It's been sealed by the architect. And one of the notes there is essentially that the maximum ground floor occupancy is 500 people, and that's based on the number of washrooms and space. If you add up all the individual spaces, it's greater than that, but that would mean full. They have a convention, they have a restaurant, bar, lounge, everything happening all at once, which essentially they're capped at 500 one way or another. It's based on the BC Building Code. The addition of the lounge and the lounge deck, the lounge I believe is 168 maximum, and the deck is 20 persons would be the maximum that they'd be allowed, and that occupancy load becomes part of the permit, and the liquor regulation branch within their license, really that would be leaving it to them. They could reduce that if they saw fit, but that's what's being requested. It's essentially the maximum according to what the building code would allow.
Any other questions for Mr. Gregg? Okay, and we have one recommendation if someone would like to move that. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. I'll move recommendation 1, that council indicate that it does not wish to provide comments to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch on an application for changes to the liquor primary license for the Blackrock Oceanfront Resort lobby and foyer.
Okay, a seconder by Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gregg. And oh, here was an exciting one. Did I flip that one over? Grad banner request. Ms. Fortune, did you want to speak to this one? Or Mr. Boyson? Okay.
Yeah, through the mayor. So thanks to Ms. Fortune for putting together this report. This is a request that came in from our high school for our grads who are not going to be able to have a regular ceremony this year. So the school came up with the idea of using banners that we have already set up with Tourism Ucluelet banners across the community. And so they put in a request for funds to have students' faces go across the community on the banners, which is a great idea. And so we looked at where the opportunities were to be able to fund this, and so there is some funds available to council to be able to put towards this, and so we're recommending that council agrees with this, and the school's going to be leading the project, leading the installation, and all the work behind it. We're just providing backing to it, and we have a second recommendation about it's the money, and then also for the installation of the banners and for the parade as well. So weather depending, they'd like to have a parade through town as well, and give the graduates some extra attention for their an alternative to their regular grad ceremonies they would have. If there's any questions you have, I'm happy to answer them, or Ms. Fortune can answer them.
Councillor Cole?
So the $400 honorarium for installing the banners, I'm assuming because this is on district stuff, wouldn't it be district staff that are getting on ladders or HIABs or whatever it takes to install the banners? We're not actually letting volunteers do that, are we? Like liability wise? To staff through
Yeah,
the
there's
mayor?
one coming. Ms. Fortune's coming to the microphone.
So through the mayor, it takes very specific equipment to put the banners up. It's unfortunately not just a ladder show, so that's why what's going to happen would be a specific person who's done it a number of times for us through other stuff that we've put up over the years. So it is a very specific piece of equipment. So that's why.
So it's actually contract like a fee. It's not an honorarium, really. It's
No, through the mayor. From my understanding, they have set this up through the high school, and they've asked it would cost way more than $400. So this is someone's doing this, and they're just getting paid an honorarium to do this through the high school. It's a volunteer, basically.
Any other, Councillor McEwen?
Thank you. Through the mayor to staff, I see that they're being called 16 temporary banners. How long will they stay up for?
Through the mayor, the intent is to have them up for a couple of weeks, and then once that end of June is done, or early mid July, then they would come down and they would go to the actual students.
Councillor Cole?
Sorry, back to my point. So then I'm assuming the person who's doing it at this super reduced rate through the school, because it's a special skill involved, has their own insurance through WorkSafe or whoever it is already bindable or whatever it is, so that the liability is actually not on the district if things go sideways during one of these special installations.
Through the mayor, yes, it is done on a volunteer basis, so there is coverage in terms of that intent. And yes, this person is a business within the district of Ucluelet.
And you're hoping that Tofino's going to come up with $1,000?
That is the intent.
Okay. And you're getting you got some feelers out there? Is it sounding promising?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Councillor Kemps?
I don't have a question, but it would be, I know Tofino has their council meeting today, and I would support a motion contributing $1,000 toward the cost of it.
Okay. Is there anybody that would like to see that change when we come to the recommendations? We've got a few head nods there, so everybody's kind of in agreement. So since you've taken that on, Councillor Kemps, if you wanted to take on recommendation number 1 with your change.
I'm going to move recommendation 1 that council contributes $1,000 towards the cost of 2020 Ucluelet Secondary School graduation temporary banners.
Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, perfect. Councillor Hoare, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 2. Oh, Councillor Hoare, sorry.
Parade.
I just wanted to say that we could encourage them to fundraise if Tofino doesn't come up with the other $1,000, in this community. It could happen, even in COVID.
We'll be optimistic that District Tofino is going to match.
Yeah.
Be curious to know how many students are from Tofino in that 16 group. Do you know Councillor Kemps?
Yeah, there's 6 from Tofino.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, does someone want to move the second recommendation? Councillor Hoare?
I will move that council supports the installation of the temporary banners and the graduation parade scheduled for Saturday, June 20th, 2020. And we all better be there.
Okay, second by Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. That'll be a fun one. Okay, we went from fun to paperwork here, administrative. Sorry, Mr. Rotenberg. Council procedure bylaw update, Mr. Rotenberg. Oh, thank you for keeping me on track there. We do have the late item, 12.5, which is streamline temporary approval for expanded outdoor seating areas by Mr. Gregg.
Through the mayor. So this report is about, it was triggered by, on Friday, we received news of a new policy directive from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch about their efforts to streamline approvals for expanding on a temporary basis until the end of October the service area footprints of some licensed operations to allow licensees to decrease the, as they're calling it, the density of their patrons. Essentially, they still have to comply with public health orders and guidelines, but allowing licensed areas which have a very defined footprint within liquor licensing to not increase in numbers, but expand in area so that people can be more spread out, if you will. And this report also is not just about the liquor licensing, but really it prompted staff to pull together some thoughts and discussions we've already had about beyond the liquor licensing, but all food and beverage businesses and their need, and also in public spaces and how they might be adapted to allow more safe social distancing, as in the sort of at this time, it's kind of extraordinary circumstances, and in that sort of time period through the summer and into the fall, as we're expecting that this will be around for a while, gave some thought to, well, what could we do? Because in normal times, if I can term it that, they're making changes to the front of a business tends to, well, it could, depending on the business and the location, could encounter a number of approval steps, things like a development permit if it's affecting the form and character of a building or a development, variances if things like parking areas are being reduced or things are being built within setbacks. If something is on public land, they would need an encroachment agreement or a license to allow that to happen, to occupy that space. Anything that's a structure that the building code would apply to would require a building permit. That really doesn't change. But what really has been looked at and recommended in the report is that if council is supportive, we've taken a quick look at, it is a finite number of businesses that we expect would be affected. And I would just note here that the report you'll see sort of in the diagrams really focuses on Peninsula Road and Main Street. It doesn't look at like Water's Edge and the Somme Restaurant or Black Rock. They don't have the same sort of pressures with space, if you will, and they're also not as visible. So I think that if they are looking at changes that would expand, likely those would be exempt as not really affecting form and character, certainly not on a temporary basis. So what we looked at in the diagrams in the report are some areas that we sort of expect that businesses might look to expand into, and we have, after the new policy directive was issued, the phone did start ringing with restaurant businesses in town asking questions about what are their options and what they could do. So we do sense that the businesses are looking for options for adapting their operations at this time. And so we're really, the recommendations are setting in a process, if council is comfortable, where we would streamline by essentially initiating development permits for any business who wants them, generally in those areas, and that if council is comfortable with that concept, that those would be authorized at the staff level, which our development application procedures bylaw allows us to do. But if it's initiated by the district, there would be no application fee because there really isn't an application from the businesses. This would be kind of a short form to allow some of this temporary adaptation to take place. In addition, we also looked at some public spaces, particularly around the Chamber of Commerce building, down around the corner of at Helen Road and Fraser Lane. There is a very generous area of pavement, and there are three or four restaurants in close proximity there. That's an area where we could do some quick changes to allow an area there that would be safe and a place for additional public seating where someone taking takeout could go and have a seat. And also, we do note some areas where there are some additional picnic table opportunities around the village square as well. So these are all kind of wrapped up together in this report. The other thing I'll note is there is a short discussion, a couple of paragraphs there talking about the Ministry of Transportation highway jurisdiction, which covers Peninsula Road down to Main Street and down Main Street to the wharf. So there are a number of businesses that front onto that may wish to expand into the road right of way. We have already reached out to the ministry to see what the process would be. I'd say that getting approvals for encroaching within that provincial highways right of way is, I would say it's unlikely in a timely fashion. But it's something certainly we will continue to discuss, but those businesses may be limited in their ability to expand out onto the street. And may have to look for other locations on private property, if you will. Maybe I'll leave it there and see if there are any questions from council, or if you like, we could pull up, if it's desired, we could pull up the diagrams. Are there any questions about specific locations or just in general?
Are there any general questions so far? Councillor Hoare?
I just noticed that the deadline is that, through the mayor to staff, that the restaurants would need to contact by June 1st. Is that a pretty tight deadline, or have you really already heard from all of them? Just curious.
Through the mayor, that's a suggestion. We haven't heard from all of them. One of the things we're trying to do here is do something that's very time effective and not. What we want to avoid is having 14 separate development permit applications dribbling through over the coming weeks, because that would take all of our staff time and we get nothing else done. So what we're suggesting and one of the recommendations is respectfully requesting that the Chamber of Commerce helps with spreading the word and get the word out to all of those businesses, and say that if they are interested, to please contact us essentially this week and let us know. And we can assist in, okay, let's come up with a diagram of what they are requesting and have a discussion, and so that we can very quickly then hand them a permit and they can go off and do what they need to do to get their business going. The idea being that really, I think they're all thinking about it right now, because this they're interested in getting things in place, really because June is right around the corner. So what that date, yes, it is a very quick turnaround, but it was intended to essentially, if we can get the word out, let's just tackle it and get on with other things, was the thinking.
Councillor Cole?
So I don't disagree with trying to streamline things and being efficient and all of that. When I'm thinking of this, I know that it's not about just additional seating for eating food. A large component of it is liquor sales. And I understand that our businesses with liquor licenses, from being in food and beverage, I know you're making your coin on beer, wine, and spirits, and it's easier to make money on that than it is on food. So I get the need, when you have a full license, to maximize on that, so you need more seating. However, I feel as though, from a lens of a paramedic lens, I know that 50% of our calls are because of substance abuse, and primarily because it's the West Coast, we are more likely the substances being abused are alcohol. I feel as though once we are opening it up into other public spaces, I've looked at these maps, and I agree that opening up some parking or opening up some green area around the business, attached to the business, part of the business property, to expand your service area makes sense. I am definitely not comfortable in the current situation with opening up additional public spaces. At any given day on a regular summer, you watch tourists with six packs up and down Helen as it is. This isn't Vegas. I don't think it should be cocktails for everybody in public. It's just not, I'm not okay with that. But I like the maps that I see here. Most of it makes perfect sense to me. A couple are iffy, but I certainly do not like the thought of opening up green space that is district property, etc., for people to find a bench to open a bottle of wine on. It just is not, it's
I think Mr. Gregg can give some clarity regarding the public space part of that. Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, thank you. It's a really good question, and the diagrams that are in your report there are they were done fairly quickly, and perhaps we should have used some different colors to differentiate. So, in short, to answer again, I think the question or the concern, this would not change the ability for someone in those public places to consume alcohol. That is prohibited by bylaw, and that would not change. The mapping sort of shows essentially we've got a couple of different thoughts happening at the same time. So for a business that has an existing liquor license, they now have the ability through the LCRB, through the province, to apply to just expand the area of their existing license. They still will have a defined service area. You know, each of those liquor licenses has a little map with a red line around it, and basically defines where they are allowed to serve alcohol. And I think they will need to be fenced, even if they're spilling out into a parking area, say, because they need to have servers who are controlling it and making sure that nobody wanders away with alcohol in their hands, just like a bar or restaurant would have to do today. That will not change. And so those other maps which show areas of additional seating in public space, like in front of the chamber or down on Helen and Fraser Lane, that's just additional seating if someone's having a picnic or a sandwich or an ice cream cone, that those would not automatically or be open up to become beer gardens or licensed spaces. That's just seating no different than if it were in a public park today, and our bylaws would prohibit the consumption of alcohol in those spaces.
You have a follow-up question?
Thank you for that explanation. I did recently hear some comments out of Edmonton and some places in Alberta where this is part of the program, and the fact about policing. So when you have a server has eyes on whoever they're serving alcohol to, they are left responsible and liable for the level of consumption and things that happen after the fact. So the greater distance away from the service area and those responsible for that service that people are then, I understand what you're saying. I see the difference between the red lines and then the squiggly green things with blue. I just am cautious, and I think we should move forward cautiously on that end of things. But I don't disagree with existing licenses having expanded seated areas as long as it's controlled properly.
Any other questions? Okay, sorry. Go ahead there, Councillor Kemps.
Goodness
You weren't
sakes.
doing that a minute ago. I looked
Oh,
up.
'cause I had my hand up, silly. So, and just to add on to Mr. Gregg's comment to Councillor Cole, the occupancy, it's not adding on to their occupancy. It's because in a restaurant now, yeah, you can only work at 50%, so they're just expanding the area. My question to the mayor, to staff, is on page 5 under Appendix A. It says, if council is comfortable with the general direction of the temporary changes. So really, it's open, right? Your little drawings are they're open to when you sit down and talk to each business, correct? The area?
Through the mayor, that's the intent. This is our best guess. We certainly haven't had time to sit down with all of those businesses, and we wanted to come to council and see if council's comfortable with staff essentially looking at generally within these areas which are around these businesses, if they are coming forward and saying we want to do some temporary changes in our seating, whether it's licensed or whether it's for ice cream, that if council is supportive of this, then at the staff level, we could very quickly issue a development permit so that they can just go ahead and do it. All of these, again, I should say, the intent is that these are temporary, and we're thinking of aligning with like what the liquor branch was saying of October 31st as sort of a end of summer season kind of, and who knows what's, if things are extending beyond that and there were requests to extend those, well, then that would be a conversation we'd have in the fall, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Right. And one more question. In regards to the mayor to staff, in regards to your June deadline, which is great because everyone's been talking. So in regards to that, are you thinking of doing like a blanket approval, or is everyone going to come in and do applications separately? How is that moving forward?
Through the mayor, how we sort of conceived of it is that the individual business will not have to apply formally. What they would do is they would come in and get a permit. So that may sound a little contradictory, but essentially what this is on the district's initiation, we'll draw up a development permit for anyone who wants one for their business. And really the conversation is, okay, what is the area? Let's define it. We'll sketch it up on a little better plan than these ones that we have in your report, so that it just shows reflects what their thoughts are. We'll have a discussion if there's any concern at the staff level about, blocking access or pedestrians and making sure the sidewalks are clear and that sort of thing. We'll have that conversation and then issue a permit with that plan attached to it, and on they go. So those will be individual to each address, each property. I know they're going to be site specific because each of these businesses has a different building, a different setting, if you will.
Okay. And I just had one more question to the mayor to staff regarding the public seating. What?
No, keep going.
Regarding the public seating, is there anywhere in that, I think it's great, like near the small craft harbor, and I know we have a large containment of restaurants down in the main core. However, there's still restaurants like out coming into town, like Howlers and Graywell and so forth. Is there anywhere when you did your walkabout that you saw where there was somewhere to put a picnic table in there, like somewhere outside of town, just not to leave out these other restaurants?
Through the mayor, certainly around the small craft harbor, we have quite a bit of green space there, and there have been picnic tables there in the past, and we've sort of highlighted where we could probably speckle some more in there. There may be some places essentially on the boulevard where we could sneak in a table or some seating. We do have really, I guess I'm looking at the drawing labeled A in your report there, in your package. The Graywell, Abundanza, Howlers. Yes, I think we could do some seating. Certainly, though, it would be across the street is where the most green space is, right within that immediate area. If someone's taking takeout, we could look at that. Again, the one limitation there, like as I said, like with Howlers, is you can see the parking that's in front of the building really is on road right of way, which would, I think, work quite well. Could be easily adapted to be public seating. However, we are thinking that approval from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure is probably unlikely and or not going to be very timely. So so that may not change. So we don't have all the answers, but other than to say that we can certainly look at that. And I think within the boulevard, there's some wider grassy boulevards there. We might be able to pop in some seating.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cole.
I don't know if I'm being super optimistic or not, but in obviously watching too many updates and with the province not opening their provincial parks to people outside of the province because they want people traveling in the province. And then there was a poll where people in the province were asked where they would go if they're traveling within the province. And 95% of them said Ucluelet Tofino. So I'm really happy if we can double people's service size so they can serve the same amount of people. But if we have anywhere near the influx would be of great fortune to the businesses, but we could be in the same space. And now what we've done with some of these is eliminated some of our parking. And we know we already have huge parking issues. So I just don't know if that is something that is currently being like, sure, it would be great if Howlers could utilize that space, but then where are those 9 or 10 people going to be parking that typically you can't park there anyways because all those spots are full. So it's just parking. And then if we are fortunate enough, and I'm optimistic, then I just was hoping that's on the radar as well. That's all.
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, yes, we have given some thought to the parking. The example of Howlers, they have a kind of underutilized parking area on the side and rear of their property. And that in the long term, in the long term, is some of the initial plans that council has seen for Peninsula Road, all of basically every parking space that requires that they back out onto the road, I would expect is one day going to be gone, because that's just not a safe alignment. No traffic engineer would sign off on that. So, and Ministry of Transportation would like to see that be eliminated in time as well. So I'd say that at some point there's going to be some changes there, whether it converts to parallel parking or pedestrian boulevard is yet to be finalized. But we have looked at some of the other locations, and the impact on parking, I would say, is actually quite minimal. For example, the space, when we're talking about it by Fraser Lane and Helen Road, there are a handful of spaces. But there's just way more pavement there than is necessary. And by going to parallel parking instead of nose in over by Zoe's there, you actually don't reduce the parking. It just puts it in a different place, and we can use the freed up space for people instead. So there may be, again, with some of these parkings where they would be taking up 1 or 2 parking spaces to create some seating as a temporary basis. The sushi restaurant is one that comes to mind, where that is on private land and taking up a couple parking spaces. Yes, it would be reducing the parking. In the overall parking supply within town, those numbers are fairly minimal. So I would suggest that as a temporary thing, it's probably worth trying. And if these were permanent changes, then I think we would recommend a little bigger process, including like a variance to their parking requirement.
You have a follow-up question, Councillor Cole? No? Okay, Councillor Camps?
I just had a comment with that. Like, I think it's a good opportunity to do a little bit of a science project for that entrance to Peninsula and what it could look like down the road once we do our, Main Street and stuff with the parking and stuff. I think that might be something to put in our back pocket to see how it all turns out.
Any other comments or questions? I just have a couple comments. I'm supportive, and I just want to say thanks, Mr. Gregg, for getting this. The reality is the province just announced this on Friday, and today's Tuesday. And so I imagine you actually probably looked at it this weekend to put this together. So I appreciate that. And it's keeping, the planning department in front of this particular sector, the restaurant sector, which is really doesn't know what things are going to look like in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And who knows how popular this outside venue or necessary will be, but at least it's giving them an opportunity, as one of the counselors likes to say, red tape. You know who you are, and I think that this is really streamlining the process to keep it equal and fair for all parties. So I don't think that all of them will be taking advantage of it, and it's yet to be determined what the demand will be. But before we get into the recommendations, I really, being handcuffed by the Ministry of Transportation about some of the actions that are some of the business community would like to do on that boulevard or on what we think should be district property, just really brings to the forefront the importance of getting this next stage with MOT so we can actually have control of our boulevard and our green space without having to go to another agency for asking for permission. I think that's about it, and I thank the staff for that. So if there's no other questions, there's some recommendations if someone would like to start on those. Councillor Hoare?
Since I know I can read well.
Yes, there you go.
And thank you, Mr. Gregg, for all of that hard work. So I move recommendation 1 that council directs staff to prepare as a district initiative development permits valid from June 1st, 2020 through October 31st, 2020 for expanded outdoor seating areas in the locations generally shown in Appendix A to the staff report dated May 26, 2020 for any adjacent business requesting such expansion. Do we want to do them as a block or separately?
We'll just go through them at once if you don't mind, just because.
Yep.
Second by Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? Councillor McCall.
Sorry, one more question this is saying that we're preemptively going to do it for everybody and spend staff time on doing it for everybody, even though we don't even know if they want it, have the funds to put it in place, to get the fencing, to get the chairs, the seat, whatever it is. So we're going to blanket our staff time and do everybody's, regardless of whether they've expressed that that's something they want yet or not. Is that correct?
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, this would be for any business who says they want it. So that's why the sort of June 1st, we say, if this is approved by council, if businesses come forward quickly and say, yes, we want to go down this road, well, then we'll put together a whole bunch of development permits and deal with them all. The intent isn't to put together permits for no purpose or for the ones that won't be used. We would need to have a conversation and see exactly what the business is wanting.
So if there's a business that like an opportunity that they think that seating is going to put them over the top, there is now a path forward without having to reinvent the wheel. Okay, we're good with that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I will move recommendation 2 that council directs staff to explore options for a streamlined approval process for utilizing district road right-of-way areas for expanded outdoor seating, including confirmation of insurance.
Second by Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Moving recommendation 3 that council directs staff to contact the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, MOTI, to seek approval for temporary encroachment within these areas of Peninsula Road under MOTI jurisdiction where adjacent restaurants wish to temporarily expand their outdoor seating.
Second, Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
And recommendation 4, that council direct staff to make physical changes to outdoor spaces to increase public outdoor seating opportunities as generally shown in Appendix A to the staff in the staff report dated May 26, 2020, and report back to council as necessary if such works exceed existing operational budgets.
Second, Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Recommendation 5, that council request that the Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce assist in reaching out to all food and beverage operators located in the center of town to spread the message that any businesses wishing to expand their outdoor seating to enable safe distancing of patrons during the COVID-19 pandemic should contact the district by June 1st to discuss their plans and the streamlined process for obtaining their development permit and, if necessary, approvals for use of public space.
Seconded by Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? Council, I have a question for Councillor Kemp, since you put your chamber hat on for a second. So you already have a scripted communication line that you're going to be, if this is approved, that you'll be reaching out to the business community?
Yeah, it's called Go Talk to Bruce. I mean, we've already had a discussion.
Okay.
You know, it's been a very open discussion with all the businesses already. So it's just making sure if that is on their radar to go speak with staff before June 1st.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councillor Cole. Councillor Cole.
Sorry, one more time to confirm and be very clear. When we're talking about approvals for use of public space, are we saying that places that are not directly adjacent to these businesses, as in expansion of their usable space for food and beverage service, are we saying that we are going to allow beverages to be served in areas outside of that, like in that? Is that what this one is about? Like in the blue lined green stuff instead of the red line stuff?
Do you want to go?
Through the mayor, there's no case that we've anticipated where what would be sort of general public seating, like in front of the chamber or in our parks, where a business would now have a liquor license or an ability to be serving alcohol. That really they're all, any of those cases are anticipated they would be immediately adjacent to existing businesses with some licensed area. There may be limited cases where they would want to use some road right-of-way. Most of those shown, it's the province's road right-of-way and not ours to control, and we think that, again, that is unlikely. The one example that comes to mind, without leafing through all the diagrams, was no, I don't think it actually applies. So I'm not sure that any of them would actually be using public space for any of their licensed activities, again, unless there was some change with the province, which we'll continue those conversations, but I do think it's unlikely.
Okay, so in no way does this mean that we are allowing that at this point?
Correct. This is not allowing, this is not a change to allow for the consumption of alcohol in public parks or on public streets without a license. That's not generally something that would be licensed. As I said, what was anticipated, there are a couple of, if you look at the example of Pluvio restaurant, they have very little space. They may have an option to do something in the back, but what was sort of a natural extension of their restaurant, because it's a very small storefront right on the edge of the property and on the sidewalk, I think their first choice would be to expand. We would divert the sidewalk around it and let them have the sidewalk and boulevard for a fenced outdoor bistro cafe type seating area, which would then be licensed, and it would have a fence around it and a waiter could serve someone out there. From what we've heard from the province, that is an unlikely scenario, just because it is under highways jurisdiction. So if that's true, then I'm not sure there are any cases where any of that sort of thing would happen. What would happen in public is just we'd find some more opportunities for picnic tables where people can take a sandwich, take an ice cream cone, go and have a picnic, take their takeout there, but it would still not be permitted for them to have open alcohol in those public places.
Got it? Okay. So all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
All right, and recommendation 6. I move that council direct staff to share the staff report dated May 26, 2020 with the Liquor and Cannabis Regulations Branch, LCRB, and indicate that the district expresses pre-approval for any liquor primary and manufacturer establishments who may apply for an expanded service area per LCRB Policy Directive 20-13.
Second by Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion? Councillor Cole?
Just going to ask one more question. In nowhere here are we addressing people that currently do not have liquor licenses that would be looking for them at this point in time. This has nothing to do with any of that.
Mr. Gregg?
Correct. Those would have to be a completely separate and different application.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, wonderful. And thank you, Mr. Gregg, and your planning department. You guys keep having these distractions, and it's nice to be ahead of that curve on that one. Yep.
And through the mayor, just to add quickly that the physical changes, talking about the outdoor spaces, staff are looking to move on that quite quickly. So we're going to be moving on that to help the restaurants, be able to provide just for takeout food, not for alcohol, just for the takeout food. And our staff are already ordering picnic tables and moving in, getting things set up for hopefully over the coming next week or so, we'll have everything set up.
Looks awesome. I noticed in Toronto there, a little drone overshot, and they actually had the picnic tables, then they had the big circles. Your bubble, I guess. Was there another comment up there, Councillor Cole?
One more question about these tables, picnic tables in our public spaces. Is it only RCMP, or does bylaw have any control over people who decide they're going to have their growler in front of the municipal hall? Question mark. Sorry.
Through the mayor, that is a municipal bylaw matter as well. That's definitely something that the RCMP monitor, but as does our bylaw officer. Open alcohol is something that is prohibited in public places in Ucluelet.
Thank you.
And obviously, as this rolls out, I have brought it up with Sergeant Mancini last week that obviously that was before the liquor branch came out, but the fact is that Parks and Rec was looking at acquiring more picnic tables just to give a bit more of that, that distancing, and there's a high probability that some people might think that's a prime opportunity to kick back and have a six-pack, but at the end of the day, we still have to open alcohol still illegal. And I must say, since we're talking about Mancini, that very profile officer on a bicycle seems to be hitting a lot of corners of the community that we're usually not hit. Have you all seen him? Everybody, maybe he's pulled you over. Okay. Where are we at here now? So that one's done. Thank you again, Mr. Gregg, for that. And since one last thing, Executive Kemp's there. Do you know if there's a few restaurants wanting to take advantage of this? Do you know off the top of your head? Is there a half a dozen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone's very, and there's restaurants right now listening in, and they're texting me and they're like, thumbs up. So Mr. Gregg, thank you very much from all the businesses for all the hard work you've done. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, we totally appreciate it. So that's great. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Roenberg, council procedure bylaw update.
All right. Through the mayor, just to make sure you all can hear me, I'm on the lapel mic. It's a little funky. My understanding is that well before I arrived here, council wanted to update their council procedure bylaw initially to change the schedule. So we started there, and we started to look at council's actual practices in comparison to what the bylaw says, and we noticed that there were some differences in terms of what was done and what was in the bylaw. So from there, I started to draft in conjunction with using some provisions from other places like Tavino and Victoria to better match council's actual practices with the bylaw. Once we have a nice match there, what we can do is we can be more consistent about how we communicate these procedures and these requirements to the public, which will make the corporate services department's job easier to do. And I think it'll allow for greater transparency among the electorate as well. There's some significant changes in the bylaw. The table in the report, I think, explains most of them. In particular, we're looking at things like allowing for special council meetings, very much like this, a special council meeting where everyone could attend by webinars or by this sort of function is one of the things we'll be looking for. We're also giving the corporate officer, our chief administrative officer, the option to cancel a meeting where there's insufficient items to justify that meeting itself. So if there just was nothing on the agenda, the meeting could be canceled by the corporate officer. You'll also notice that we schedule specifically the committee of the whole meetings so that they would be set out on the schedule, and that all of our meetings would be conducted in accordance with that schedule, all of our regular meetings. We set out some procedures for public hearings, and we give council the option to have those public hearings during council meetings. So for example, at the end of this meeting, we could go into a public hearing and then come back into council and make a final determination, which is something that we hadn't set out in the past. We also explicitly include the Harbor Authority in this procedure bylaw. There's also been some changes to the order of the agenda itself, so the order of business on the agenda. It also specifically creates a late items deadline for the agenda package, and it pushes that out all the way to 2 hours right before the council meeting. That way, if something comes in very last moment, like this report today, and like other reports in the past, it can be justified. It also sets out provisions for a notice of motion. So this is something that we've used from time to time in the past. Sometimes the mayor or another council member will send out a letter that suggests, you know, I'd like to make this motion at the upcoming meeting. This creates a more specific and outlined process for that. It allows basically for this council meeting to be the notice meeting, the following council meeting to be the meeting where the matter is discussed and voted on, unless council adopts by unanimous resolution that they want to discuss this item at this particular meeting. It also removes direct reference to petitions, and it prohibits specific types of public input and questions and delegations. For example, if there was a public hearing, one of the things council has to be very wary of is receiving additional feedback about the matter before it goes to third reading and then finally adoption. So it specifically prohibits that, and it gives the mayor the authority to stop that question period there and move things forward. It also addresses correspondence directly. Our office gets quite a bit of correspondence, and we wanted to iron down a procedure that you guys understood and that writers understand in terms of what correspondence gets on council agendas and what they can expect from us when they send in that correspondence. And here it specifically says basically that we're going to let them know where that correspondence has been forwarded to. Has it been forwarded to a council agenda? Has it been forwarded to a manager? It goes on to talk about what motions the chair is allowed to refuse and what motions he's allowed to deal with, and it sets out specific motions that are prohibited or may be prohibited by the chair, and then it sets out a procedure for council members to appeal that ruling of the chair. So if someone said, you know, I'd like to make a privilege motion saying that it's too hot in chambers, if the mayor, for one reason or another, suggested that it's inappropriate to make that motion at this point, that council member can come back and they have recourse. It sets out provisions for reconsideration, which we can review in detail at another time. And it specifically authorizes us to give bylaws 3 readings in a single motion, which is part of the reason that I've insisted in the past that when we're doing bylaw readings, we do them separately. First reading, and then you vote, and then you move on to the second. So I think it should expedite things to a certain extent. Another thing, and it's a challenge I think that came up during one of our council meetings in the past, is where a council member is attending by audio means only, it requires that council member to voice their vote. So if for some reason your video feed were to fail at one moment or another, we'd require you to state your name and to voice your vote. It defines the powers and duties of the chair in terms of inappropriate conduct, either by a member of council or by a member of the audience, and then it authorizes the chair to remove that person. In the case of a council member, it also establishes procedures for that person to re-enter the council meeting. As I said, it introduces procedures for public hearings, and then it consolidates the sections that formerly addressed committees of the whole and commissions and select committees separately, and instead it deals with them all similarly in one particular section, which basically says that section A, B, and C, and this is for reference and not specific, these particular sections apply to those sections within the bylaw. One of the things I'd like to point out is that other bylaws are tied to this bylaw. So for example, the Board of Variance bylaw says that its procedure is determined by the current council procedure bylaw. So that bylaw will have to be amended in the future. And I'm here to take any questions that you guys may have. The two recommendations are to take it to first reading, and then give it to second reading, and direct my office to publish notice, because notice is required with a bylaw like this before we actually amend it, or in this case, replace it. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Rotenberg? Seeing none? Oh, Councillor Cole.
I just have a comment because this is a lot of work, and I'd just like to say thank you.
I appreciate that, Rochelle.
You got 1 out of 5. That's pretty good. He knows it's all good. Okay. Yes, thank you, Mr. Rotenberg. This is something that's been on the doctorate for a long time, and it's not exciting as outside patio seating, but definitely it's something that's long overdue, and we appreciate it. Couple recommendations. Since maybe Councillor Cole, you gave the compliment. Do you want to run with it?
Yeah, you bet. I can move that. So now I'm scrolled all over the place. That council give Ucluelet or District of Ucluelet Council Procedures Bylaw number 1264 2020 first reading.
Second by Councillor Kemps. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
And that council give District of Ucluelet Council Procedures Bylaw number 1264 2020 second reading, and direct staff to provide notice of the proposed bylaw.
Second by Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion?
I just want to say that calling in from Mexico will be a little bit harder when you have to make sure that you're vocalizing that you're there. But who knows when that'll happen again.
I actually thought about you when we were moving through this here, and he was listing some of the comments that your traditional twice-a-year Mexico trips are probably not going to happen for 2020, and I'm hoping you'll survive.
I'll be all right.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And thank you. And I wanted to comment, I noticed on there was it talked about inaugural, and it's hard to believe that we've only been working together for just over 1.5 years. Doesn't it feel like it's been a long journey here so far? So, and anyways, just thought I'd throw that out there. And thanks again, Mr. Rotenberg. Any other business? Councillor Kemps?
Through the mayor to staff, I just had some questions regarding from the community regarding playgrounds and when we could expect them to open. No.
Coming.
Through the mayor, the BCRPA restart plan has just rolled out today, and with which it outlines the number of things. Playgrounds is one of the things that's been also through WorkSafe BC in terms of parks and playgrounds. At this moment, we are looking at probably more than likely a fall rollout for the playgrounds, In terms of green spaces and trails and parkways, the intent is to keep them open if nothing changes through phase 2. We have allowed the daycare to operate the playground, and what we're doing is we're closing it to the general public, and the daycare is being responsible for cleaning the equipment twice a day.
So another just an add-on to that, I read something yesterday where Cheryl McClay sent this thing regarding playgrounds, and I know there's a comment what WorkSafe BC said to me yesterday, just kind of cemented it, how we're all just moving through this together.
That's correct.
And there's no really right or wrong. So there was something about municipalities, about playgrounds. It's up to the municipality when to open playgrounds. So I was just wondering, have you seen that, or what apparently there's two different messages coming out of that?
Through the mayor, there was actually no specific order to close the playgrounds. What most of the municipalities did was to close them down, and that was the general consensus for the province in terms of BCRPA. You are correct. That is a municipality's choice. I am at this point in time recommending that we keep them closed for the moment, but that we ensure that our green spaces and trails are still open to the public and access for all.
Now, I would like to have more discussion around the playground thing. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about that. I also had another question regarding after school care. As all our families start returning back to work, there's a question about the age 5 to 12 group, and I don't know if there's a conversation about space for the after school care.
There is, through the mayor. I've been working with Kathy from the Daycare Society. We are looking at trying to open up the UAC for them as quickly as possible. We just went through the final forms today, and the intent is to have them be able to open that up as soon as possible.
Okay, I think we just need some messaging around that. There's a lot of families really stressing out about going back to work and not having the proper care for their children. I think we just have to work on how we roll that out and kind of talk to our families about that. Just like that.
Yeah, we can look at doing something through the school. The messaging would primarily obviously come through the daycare.
Okay, thank you.
You do bring up an interesting comment, because I heard that on one of our weekly provincial calls, was some other municipalities asking about parks, kids parks, we'll call them, and playgrounds, we'll call it, sorry. And it was interesting, their comment, just like Ms. Fortune said, is like there was no provincial stance to shut it down, although, and I would echo what Councillor Kemps is saying, that hopefully perhaps when Mr. Boyson's doing his bi-weekly task force updates, if things are looking a little bit more positive for playgrounds, the thought of keeping that closed till May on a nice sunny day here, or sorry, till the fall. I think that what we're seeing in the skate park and the basketball court, there seems to be a lot of compliance and people are doing a good thing. And so I just hate to put that in stone, that fall is the opening date for playgrounds.
Through the mayor, I'm constantly looking at updates. I agree 100%. It is a conversation, and we can certainly continue with that conversation. And a lot of moving parts right now, working with my staff right now to look at outdoor programming for the summer and addressing that end of things in a safe and effective manner. So certainly I'd be more than willing to have a good look at that, and we can have discussion around that, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just really important for our kids to get out there, and as long as we go through the social distancing and stuff, I would really like to see playgrounds open, right?
We can certainly look at it, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other business? Hearing and seeing none. Question period, Mr. Rotenberg.
No questions have come in.
No questions. Well, we're adjourned. Thanks. Have a good evening.